Welcome to the Perfectly Imperfect podcast, where perfectly imperfect people join together to converse about God and life experiences, how life affects our day-to-day, whether that be negatively or positively, while also including how our faith pieces us together and heals us in the process, no matter how flawed you are. So, thank you all for joining us on another episode. Today on this episode we have Jessica Gavito as our guest for this week. She's 28 years old and she's a settlement worker in schools. She studied social work and loves running and cooking on her own time, and she also loves the sun. She's also starting up a consultant business, and she's also a friend of mine from our ward in our church. Anyways.
Hey Samantha, I'm excited to be here, so thank you for having me.
So, our topic is going to be kindness versus anger. Is kindness a weakness? Does anger make you tough and strong? So, to start off, I'm going to ask you, in your words, what do you think makes a kind person?
I think a kind person has a lot of self-control. Or like, a kind person is someone who's able to like process an emotion or a situation and respond in a respectful way. That's one way that I see kindness. But kindness is someone who also like thinks of others, thinks of themselves, and someone who, I guess, tries to do good or be good.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I like what you said, that a kind person is a respectable person.
Mm-hmm. So
they're very respectful towards others, and they're also very considerate, I think, as well. So oftentimes in my own life, I have encountered people who really see kindness as a weakness and anger as a true strength. Have you encountered that in your own life as well?
Mm-hmm. I think, I think for sure. I think kindness is seen as a weakness because sometimes it's viewed as like you're putting yourself last, or I think they look at it at like the perspective of like justice and injustice. Like if someone did something or said something and like the way you responded isn't in the same way, like it's like you're putting yourself on the back burner, or like you need to stand up for yourself a little bit more. Like you need to be strong and like firm, and and I do believe like we do have to like stand up for ourselves and like have boundaries and things like that. But I also think that like it has to do with like delivery or like reaction. Like the way we deliver our kindness is what gives us strength versus weakness. Because when we look at anger I think is more like impulsive, right? And when we act on impulse, I think it's more of a weakness versus a strength, because we're not allowing ourselves to process the situation, or like we're letting our emotion guide our actions.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference. When we let our emotions like guide our actions, or when we let anger guide our actions, then that's when anger is a weakness, because we're not able to fully think and respond in a correct way.
Yeah.
And then kindness is seen as like, well, you should have done this and you should have done the, all these things like you should have done. But kindness, I think, takes more discipline.
Yeah.
So I think that's a strength, because you're able to process a situation, think, and then act. So it takes a lot of strength, it takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of work to be able to be a kind person. And I think that's a strength, when you're able to see, like, analyze and like allow the process to let you act versus impulse. Well, I was angry in the moment, so I said this or I did that, right?
I think that's a pretty cool way to think of kindness as a discipline, because I never really thought of it that way. And I think that's so true, because comparing it to anger, and anger can be very impulsive, like you said, but kindness does require discipline. It requires you to kind of take yourself out of a situation and just analyze it. But I wanted to ask you, how would you balance being kind, but also when you have to, like, when there are moments where you have to, like, defend yourself and, like, be firm and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between being nice and being kind. I think a nice person will be like, it's okay, Samantha, that's fine. Oh, I don't want to hurt your feelings, it's okay. Or you did this to me, it's fine. Like, oh, you missed our date, or you came very late and I was waiting for you. And like, it's just very passive, like, oh, it's fine, it's okay. I think that's what a nice person does. They try to kind of avoid conflict or avoid expressing feelings. I think a kind person is able to say, hey, I felt very upset when this and this happened. It's a kind person is able to deliver their emotion in a way that doesn't put the other person down, but that you're able to, like, still stand your ground, right? And I think it's important to be kind because you don't hurt the other person's feelings, but you're also, like, standing your ground, or, like, setting boundaries, and, like, expressing how you're feeling. So I think there's a difference between being kind and being nice. And I think like the Savior was a kind person, right? Like, he was someone who was obedient to the laws and commandments, but he wasn't someone who was like, it's fine, don't do that. No, he's like, hey, like, this is how we're supposed to live and how we're supposed to do things. But next time, let's do better. You know, it's still laying down, like, that boundary. I think it's all about just the delivery, right? And I think, like, people don't want you to feel angry. People don't want you to feel sad or disappointed, or, you know, and I think especially as someone who is, like, religious, or, like, someone who believes in Christ, like, people don't want you to feel, don't be sad, Samantha. Don't be angry. It's not good to be angry. It's not good to be sad. And I think it comes from, like, a place of love. Because, like, if I love someone, like, I don't want you to be upset. I don't want you to be sad. But the reality is that we have to feel these emotions, right? Like, in order for you to feel happiness, you have to feel sadness, joy, anger. Like, these emotions are part of who we are as human beings. And, like, if we suppress anger, that only, like, builds up inside of us, right? Like, not being able to express, hey, I'm angry, I'm upset. Like, I don't think that's a good thing. And I don't think, like, we have to, like, avoid that, right? Or look at it as something good and bad. I think it goes back to what I was saying before. Like, we can't allow emotion to guide our actions. We have to, okay, you're feeling angry, that's fine. Like, feel that emotion, but don't let it be the thing that makes you act, right? Because I think if you, like, the times that I've been angry, like, oh, that was so like, if you send a message to someone, like, out of anger, most times when you're, like, cooled down, or, like, you know, the anger has passed, you're like, oh shoot, that was mean, or, like, I shouldn't have said that. You're not upset that, like, you were angry, you're upset at how you expressed the anger. So I think that's the difference, right? When we're able to be like, okay, I was upset, I am upset, but what am I going to do about it? How am I going to express it? And I think that's when, like, kindness comes in, right? And that's when, like, kindness is a strength, because you're able to be like, hey, I was upset, this wasn't okay, and, like, start that dialogue, right? Because like what I was saying, like, it's not most times when we're upset and we act out of anger, we're not upset that we were angry, we're upset at how we reacted or what we did in that moment of anger. So that's when anger is like a weakness, and it's actually not a strength to like burst out in anger and like scream at people, put people down, belittle people. The strength comes when you're able to be kind and like you're still taking the other person's feeling into consideration. I think that's important. Like, you don't want people to, especially someone you love, like, to feel bad, but you don't want your feelings to be pushed aside, if that makes sense.
It's interesting because in my own journey, I guess you could say, as I've gotten older, I've kind of understood the difference between being nice and being kind, and when that comes especially with the people closest to you, because sometimes the people closest to you are the ones that sometimes hurt you the most, and sometimes you have to create those boundaries. And I've learned that more as I've gotten older, and I used to kind of feel guilty because of that, and I used to think like I just would try to like push away how I would feel, but that kind of builds up kind of a resentment, and you kind of fester up anger. And then in those moments, like, of bottling up all those emotions, like, you could be impulsive with anger, and you blow up and you say things you don't mean. But I feel like I've had some practice in the sense of like, okay, I can be kind to myself, and I can be kind to others in a way that respects them and respects me also. So hopefully that made sense. But
yeah, and I think that's when like people are like, being kind isn't a strength, because people think that you're like putting yourself to the side. But like what you said, you're actually also putting yourself, like being able to express yourself, like that's like a strength as well. But I think a lot of people don't see that. They think like when you're being kind, you're just like not putting yourself in that equation. And I think I can relate with what you're saying. Like a lot, for a long time, like I was labeled like, oh, you're so nice, and I used to hate that people called me kind and nice, because I thought it was like so passive, or like it wasn't a good thing. But like as I've grown and as I've learned and experienced, like I actually like that label, or like I like to be like kind, because like I feel like the world needs more of it, but like I also feel better. Like at the end of the day, I feel better when I'm able to control my responses, when I'm able to like help someone else, when I'm able to like help myself. But I think that's like the hardest part, like being kind to yourself. But it's actually a strength, like it's something that can be practiced, and it's something that can be developed, like kindness.
Yeah. Why do you think people would see kindness as weak and anger as tough and strong? I'm not sure if I...
anger is strong, and I think especially as a woman, especially like this time, like you have to be tough, you have to be firm, you have to like, you know, be all these things as a woman, because you know, I just feel like it's such a big topic, or like it's such a big pull of like what women should be. But I think like we need more kind women. We need more women who are able to like be in control, who are able to like help others even process their emotions and their actions. I don't know, I'm just so big on like our emotions can guide our actions, right? But like, even if we're talking about like who we are as children of God and like our purpose here on earth, like our purpose here on earth is to have control over our bodies, right? Be able to like be more in tune with who we are as spiritual beings, or like as children of God. And I think it comes back to like, we can't just like run on impulse. We can't just run on like what we want with how we want to. Is we have to like master ourselves. And I think it comes down to like learning that it's okay to feel a negative emotion, right? Because like it's labeled like angry's bad, happy's good, but like we're not always happy. We're not always, you know, these jolly kind people. And like when we're able to understand that, like it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be upset, it's okay to be angry. Like when we learn that, we're able to accept that and be like, okay, like I'm feeling this emotion, let me like pause and like feel it, but let me respond in a kind way. Right? Like we can't let those things like, what is it, like I've been saying it this whole time, like direct or like be the reason why we act, right? And I think something that really helped me understand that, like understand like proper communicating and like feeling these emotions, was like actually my schooling, where I was able to kind of like put both together. Like, oh wait, like we are human beings, we are going to feel angry, but what makes the difference is how we respond, right? And how we respond will determine our strength, in my opinion. Like, right? Versus letting things go out of hand because we're feeling angry. And if you think about like all the things that people do because they were angry, you know, it's like, it's crazy the things people do when they're angry, or when they're jealous or sad or this or that, you know, like that's, it can like take us a whole other way. But it's like being able to be like, okay, I'm feeling angry, but how do I express that in a way that I want to? Because at the end of the day, I don't think anyone wants to like scream at someone, or like, you know, unless that's really what they want to do. But like, I think truly like people regret when they let anger lead a conversation or a response. It's
interesting because when I think about the times that I've let anger kind of take control, and that's how I responded, and when I cool down, I have this like awful sinking feeling of like guilt, but not only just guilt about how I responded, but also how that kind of adds to my character. Like, do I want that to be a part of my character? Because there's something I read where it's just like, in everything that you do, I forgot what it said, but it's like everything that you do, the littlest things that you do, how you respond to things, how you talk to people, how you just think, or in general, it just it pours into everything you do.
Into like everything you do.
Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense, but like for me, it was kind of like coming to terms with like, do I want this a part of me? Do I want, I don't know what the title is for it, but it's, I don't know if it's like goes under the title of morals or morality. But yeah, so but I've always kind of seen anger as a negative thing. And then I'm gonna get a little personal here, but I had like a while ago, I had a session with my mental health counselor, and I was telling her how like I've just been so angry like at everything, and I don't know why. And like I was explaining to her how like I try so hard to like push anger down because I've always viewed it as something that's just not good. And then she was there, she was just smiling, and she's like, that's a good thing. Like, it's good that you're letting it out because I've held it in for so long. But like, it is very important in how you respond. So
I want to add something.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned character, right? Like who we are and like who we can become, or like who we're continually becoming, right? And I think like you mentioned, like sometimes we don't feel that anger, or we're like, I don't want to start a conflict, or whatever the reason may be of why we don't want to feel that. I think like for example, like I know who I am when I'm happy. I know who I am when I'm feeling excited or when I'm feeling accomplished, right? But like, do I know who I am when I'm angry? Or like, do I know who I am when I'm sad, right? And in order to like know our full self, these parts, like these sides are like part of who we are. And it's like being able to like feel that emotion, or like allow ourselves to be like, okay, like I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling disappointed. A lot of I would say, like even myself, a lot of times I'm like trying to not suppress it, but just like, oh, I don't want to be sad, or I don't want to like, that's not who I'm supposed to be, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, in order to know our whole self, we have to like know what it feels like to be in all of these emotions. And I think it's again like changing that dialogue of like, okay, it's okay to be angry, it's okay to feel sad, and then learning how to express that in a kind way. And I think that's when like that's a strong person. That's a person who's like is disciplined, who has character, who's able to be like, you know what, I was upset. And how do you know you were upset? Because I allowed myself to feel that. I didn't allow myself to act upon the anger, but I allowed myself to feel being upset, feel being sad. And then because I felt that, right, like you also can sort of sympathize or have a bit of compassion for people around you, right? Not that like you have to let people be angry at you and mean, but that you're able to understand like, hey, people have all these types of emotions. So I think it's a sign of strength when we're working on ourselves and like understanding that like, hey, I can feel upset, I can feel angry. And I think sometimes even like as someone who, you know, I believe in Jesus Christ, like a lot of times it's like you're not supposed, like Christ was kind and nice, but I do think he's felt anger, he's felt sad, like he's literally felt all these emotions, but he didn't allow those emotions to like, he didn't act upon those in a negative way, if that makes sense. But like the strength comes in, or the character comes in, when you're able to be like, hey, that was not okay. Or hey, I was upset, or I felt sad, or I felt angry when this and this happened. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything you just said. One thing, like when I think of like a kind person, I think back to like the people I've met in my life who, like, people who have gone through like really dark stuff. They've gone through awful things in their past, and usually you'd assume that people like that would like become a product of what they've experienced. But what is so admirable is when those people kind of reject, being like the dark things from their past, and they become like they're usually the kindest people you meet. And I think it's really interesting how someone who's gone through such awful things can be so kind, which also makes me think of the Savior, because he went through like awful things. He was hated, and everything that he went through in general, and he just loved people unconditionally. And like I always think of when he's up on the cross, and he's like, I think they were his last words, and he said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." It's just going back to like how someone can go through such awful things and still want to love and have hope and be kind, which I think is very admirable.
Yeah, I agree.
So for you, what are your defining moments in your life that have solidified the importance of kindness in your life and the life of others? Like, is there a moment where kindness was shown to you and a moment where you have shown it as well?
Ooh, good question. Let me think of like a defining moment. I have like little examples.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't drink coffee, and my family does, like my cousins and all of this. Tiramisu cake is coffee, right? Yeah. So I went over to visit some family, and they made tiramisu. And then I was like, oh, like I didn't say anything because I was like, I'm not gonna have some, obviously, because it had coffee in it. And then my cousin comes out with this small little pan, and she's like, I made some with hot chocolate for you because I know you don't drink coffee. And I was like, oh my gosh, this person is so thoughtful. Like, you know, like it's just like this small thing of like, you didn't have to do that, right? I have other moments where, let's say, some people are drinking alcohol. I've had people bring me like non-alcoholic drinks because they're like, we wanted you to come, but I brought you this. And it was like, you really didn't have to. Like, and it's not things that like I say like, I don't drink alcohol or I don't drink coffee. It's just people observe and they're like, oh, I'm gonna do this so that person feels included, you know? So it's like little things where I'm like, why would they do that? And it's like, well, because this person actually loves me or wants me to be around, but understands the boundaries or like the respects who I am as a person, right? I think another example, like a defining moment where I was like, I'm trying to think of another one. I used to work at Nissan, like the car place, Nissan. And there's someone who's in charge of cleaning cars. Like that's his job. Like before they sell a car, he has to like clean them so that the person, when they come, the cars are cleaned. I don't know how they got into my car, but I remember it was a hard week. I had just recently, this was like my first car. It was like a 2003 Mazda. It was like this old little car, but it was my first car. And I would have long days. Like I was in school full time. I did volunteering, and then I'd have to go to work, and like I'd finish around 9:30 at night. So like it was just like long days for like a long time. And then one day I leave work and my car is clean, like spotless, and I'm like, at first I was confused. I was like, wait, was my car like always this clean? And then the next day I asked him like, hey, did you clean my car? And he's like, yeah, I saw that it's a bit dirty. And he's like, so I just did it. So I was like, I feel like I've had like just like these small like experiences throughout my life. It's like nothing huge where like, oh my goodness, like but these small things are huge, right? These small things are big, where people like observe a situation and do something for someone else, right? And I think we have to be so attentive to those things. Like a lot of times it's the small things that have like bigger impacts on people. You don't know what people are going through, right? Like, or what their situation is, but if you're able to like observe, if you're able to kind of not even just observe, but sometimes you'll have like a thought like, oh, I can do this for someone, or hey, I'm already doing this for myself, let me do it for someone else. Like it's those small things that I think have a greater impact, right? Where they seem so insignificant, but it has a big significance because one, you don't expect it, and two, it's like, why was this person nice to me or kind, so I think I try to do that. I try to like be observant of the people around me. I think like for a long time, not even a long time, like I do a lot. Like days are really busy, and like you just have a lot of responsibilities, where like you could literally go through a whole day, but like if you don't stop and kind of see the people you're around, get to know the people you're around, it's like you won't find those opportunities to kind of be kind to others. So I think it takes a lot of like slowing down, thinking of others, even when you're like not going through something. Like say you're going through a hard time, those are the moments that I think are hardest sometimes, because I'm going through this, I'm going through that, but when you're able to still like look around you, and it's hard sometimes, because I think a lot of times we're like, I'm going through a hard time, can someone do something for me? Like that just like is the mentality. But I know for a fact that like even when you're going through something difficult, like when you look around, there's always someone to help, or there's always something kind to say or to do. And it's those little things that I think have bigger impact on people. Yeah. Right? Or that they help you realize like, oh wow, people are aware of who I am. Right?
Oh, I think that's really cool. I do agree with how the small moments are really big moments. Those small moments are defining moments. So I'm kind of gonna change the direction a little bit. How have you seen the effects of anger and the people who believe it's a strength rather than a weakness? Like, how have you seen that personally in your life? Not even if it's like in your own life, or if you like witnessed it in others, but yeah.
So how has anger negatively?
How have you seen the effects of anger in like the people who believe it's a strength rather than a weakness?
I think a lot of times people who see strength as anger as a strength think that people listen to them out of respect or out of admiration. People are scared of you. People don't want to trigger you because they don't want to make you angry, and it's like, it's sad because people don't want to be around that. And I think that's like, people don't want to be around someone who's angry. People don't want to don't feel safe around someone who's angry, don't feel happy around someone who's angry. And I don't think that person who, acts out in anger or thinks like, it's a strength. feels happy at the end of the day, because I think they know, like, oh, who wants to be yelling, who wants to be putting people down? Like, I don't think people who like are that way want to be that way, but they haven't figured out how to not be that. Does that make sense? And I think, like, just with my job, with what I do in my work, it affects families, it affects children, it affects youth, right? Like, it affects the dynamic of a home, it affects relationships, and unfortunately, like, it's a cycle that continues, right? Like, if I'm only around people who think like being angry is like yelling and like putting people down and go do this, like, it's a learned behavior that unfortunately gets passed on. But it gets to a certain point where that one person will kind of be like, I'm not okay, right? And they have to relearn how to be in power, because I think most of the times it's a way of people being in power or feeling they have control, is being angry, right? But I think a lot of more times, like, especially like employers can be mean sometimes. I personally haven't had like a very mean employer, but I've heard a lot of different people who have like very mean, angry employers, and people want to run out of there. People aren't happy to be there. And a lot of times it's like, well, if you recognize people, if you uplifted people more, if you were kinder to people, people would value you more, would listen to you more, would want to be around you more, right? I don't know if that answered your question, but it does. It's like like how we were talking about, like, kindness has like a domino effect on, like, it's the small things that are big. Unfortunately, like, if people around angry people become angry, you know, and it's like not, it's just like an ugly cycle, right? And
I see what you mean. So, have you had moments in your life where you've fallen victim to anger, but you needed to be kind in that moment? Sorry, I'm a little hungry.
We've all been angry. Like, like, we've all have felt anger. I used to fight a lot with my older brother when I was younger. And now that I think about it, and like we have a great relationship now, it was like, what, were we crazy? Like, we would throw things at each other, we would say mean things to each other, and it was like, for what purpose? Like, you know, like, for what purpose? And I think it goes back to, like, let's say I say something mean to my brother, after I was like, oh shoot, like, that was mean. Like, I would feel bad for being mean to one of my siblings, right? And then I think the harder part is like apologizing, right? And being like, oh, I was sorry for doing that. And like, when we were younger, like, I wouldn't even apologize, like, or like he wouldn't even apologize, right? And that can affect your relationships, right? And also not only your relationships, but your relationship with yourself. Like, when you let anger like dictate your actions, you don't like how that feels, but then you label yourself, oh, I'm an awful person, I'm mean, I scream a lot. Like, you start giving yourselves these labels, and you think like that's who you are, right? Like, and unless you like really have a change of heart and kind of learn to kind of have that strength of like, oh, sorry, like, we were little, right? But still, like, you did feel bad, you did feel not good about it. Like, the strength comes in when you're able to kind of be like, okay, like, when you try to correct it, right? And it sounds so simple, but like, apologies go a long way. not just apologies, but like when you change behavior along with an apology, right? And it takes a lot of like self-control to be like, someone just said something to me that was unbelievable, but let me like take a moment, you know, like let me just take a moment. Like you don't have to react right then and there. And that's where like the practice comes in, where you're able to have self-control, I guess.
I think it's sometimes like we're first introduced to kind of like an essential life lesson is when we're kids, and like I've also had the same thing where like with my siblings, and where I had to learn to say sorry, or my sibling had to, and I think that's like, I mean, yeah, we're just kids, but like it's, those are the first moments we learn. And yeah. Anyways, I wanted to touch on two things before we end. So there's this talk called The Virtue of Kindness by Joseph B. Worthlin, and he says, nothing exposes our true selves more than how we treat one another in the home. And kind of to relate to what we were talking about with this quote, I've often heard from people, like, because I was talking to someone years ago, I remember I was a lot younger, and one of the things that I wanted to change was the way that I treat people. And it was one of my family members. I can't remember if it was an uncle, but I was talking to him about how I want to be different, but he was like, well, one of the best places to start is at home. And I was like, oh, great. Because like it's so hard sometimes with your family, and like I didn't get along that well with certain siblings, and with others I did, and it was easier. But then like just in general with certain family members, I was like, okay, this is gonna be really hard, and I don't know if I can do this, but might as well give it a try. But I mean, after that I kind of saw how important that is, because I guess what you do at home also applies to what you do outside of your house. Like, I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, like our home is like one of our primary places of socialization. Like that's where our first exposure is on how we interact with people, because like before we go to school and learn to socialize in a school setting, like we're in a home, we're part of a family, whatever that looks like we all have a home, we grow up. And like one thing that I'm grateful for, I think with my family, our parents always allowed us to have open dialogue, which I think was great, which also meant we had to learn to apologize. We had to learn to be kind to each other, right? And I think they did a really good job at not letting us be angry and, you know, hit and all that, but allowing us to, they would like bring us back, like, okay, like what was that about, you know, where we were able to kind of talk about, like, in our small way, like, oh, you hit me or you did this, right? But we learned that, like, hey, like, this is your brother, this is your sister, like, we are a family, like, you know, learning, like, they helped us understand the importance of each other and how we need to be kinder. I know that sounds so like, but if you're able to do that in the home, and I think it's harder to do in the home because the people you live with see all sides of you. They see the good in you, but they also see the not so good in you, right? So they're able to, so if I know all the bad about you, it's easier for me to be like, well, you do this and you know, and sometimes people will call you out on it, so that hurts my feelings. But that's when, like, if you're able to like see someone's good and bad and still love them and still be kind, like that's a true strength, right? Because you understand that, like, hey, I also have good parts of me, but I also have not so good parts of me. So just like I deserve to have mercy and kindness given to me, I should be able to also do that for others, right? And it's hard. But I think maybe that's one of the reasons why it might be harder, because you see both sides of a person when you're so close to them. But what's helped me is to understand that I'm also not perfect. I'm also not always happy, and you know, I think like as I've gotten older, I think I've become more aware of like, if I'm able to have bad days, so are other people. But it's like expressing that. And I think, I don't know if this is like correct to say, like sometimes even culturally, boundaries is a hard thing, right? Like, hey, I need some space right now, I don't feel like talking. It's like, what do you mean you don't feel like talking? But it's like implementing these things in the home, right? And so the home is where we spend most of our time, especially when we're younger.
I'm thinking of like, it's almost like a foundation for life, I guess.
Yeah. And I think what's cool is like we get to do that, or like as you get older, like you get to decide what normal is, or like you get to decide like, hey, like when I'm upset, I'm going to express it. When I'm not being kind, I'm going to learn to apologize, right? So I think like that's something really cool. Like you can change, or like, not saying that everyone comes from like, I think every family tries their best with what they know, with what they have. But like you as an individual have like the ability to like implement that in whatever your home looks like.
So in the same talk, there's another quote, and he says, if you are criticizing others, you are weakening the church. If you are building others, you are building the kingdom of God. As Heavenly Father is kind, we should also be kind to others. So my question is, what are your thoughts on that?
So it's when we're kind to others, we're building the kingdom, right? That was one part of it.
So if you're building others, you are building the kingdom of God. As Heavenly Father is kind, we should also be kind to others.
Yeah, I think my thoughts are, what, so true. But it's true because if we can lift someone, if we can like mend relationships, if we can be like a sense of positive, like it's a domino effect, right? Like if I, like for example, leave to work right now, and let's say I'm in a good mood and I'm happy, like I'm gonna spread that to the people around me. Like you never know like what a positive, like the positive influence that you can have on others. Even by the way you like say good morning, or like just interact with people, like it's something so little, but like your energy and like your spirit, like if it's uplifted, you uplift others, and then they could be like, oh, like Samantha was so kind today at work, and like, you know, it like affects others. Or like even just sharing real experiences, to be like, hey, like I was so upset at so and so, and instead of like yelling and screaming at them, we were able to have a conversation. Now our relationship is stronger, right? Like you teach people without even knowing it, right? Like you don't know if that person's like, oh wow, like that's such a good way to view things. And I think I've had so many experiences like that, where like coworkers or people do something kind or share an experience where they're like, hey, I was upset, I was angry, or this terrible thing happened, but I turned it into something positive. And then I'm like, wow, like I want to be more like that person. So that's, I think, how we build the kingdom, right? It's sharing our real experiences, whether it's a bad one, right? But like, you know, letting people know that like, hey, I'm a normal human being. I get angry. I don't have good days all the time. I'm going through something really difficult right now. Like when we're able to like be vulnerable, or like, you know, share that, like it gives others opportunity to be like, whoa, I'm not an outsider, right? I'm not the only one who feels upset or sad or lonely, but I'm someone who other people are experiencing the same things. Because I think a lot of times we feel othered, like, oh, am I the only one that ever gets upset at this? Or am I less than because I get angry at that? Like, and I don't know if it's embarrassed, but we don't want to share those things, right? Because it makes me less of a good person. But it actually doesn't. It makes you human. It makes you real, right?
Yeah.
And like we're all on a journey, right? And we're all trying to be better individuals. And I appreciate when people like share their not so good moments with me, because I'm able to be like, wow, like that person's still great. Like if you go to a friend and say something like, you know, I was so upset at this thing and this happened, I don't think they love you less. I think they kind of like love you more, because they're able to be like, whoa, Samantha was angry, but she was able to like, you know, I don't know if I'm even making sense.
Oh yeah, you make
and
sense.
I think like that's such a symbol or a sign of strength, when someone's able to kind of be like, yeah, I was upset, right? I was going through a hard thing, because everyone is feeling that, right? We're all not always the jolliest and the happiest, but what makes us happy is knowing that like I can be better, or I will, you know, that I can grow and I can learn, and I can learn from my experiences. And I think that's a strength, like being able to take a situation and like let yourself grow from it, right? And change doesn't just happen out of nowhere. Like it takes practice, but like as you consciously allow kindness to like be what guides your action, then that's how you build others. You build yourself, and you're just being real, like, you know.
Yeah, I think if you lead with that kind of attitude, that kind of example, you create a safe environment for not only yourself but for others as well. I think that's pretty cool. Anyways, to close, is there anything else that you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to say?
So we were talking about kindness being a weakness and anger being strength. I think it's the total opposite. Like it's just the opposite. Like it's okay to, it's just all about in the delivery, right? If we're able to deliver our message or how we're feeling in a way that is kind or calm, that takes a lot of strength. That takes a lot of strength to be able to be like, let me breathe a little and let me express it, right? And anger, you don't feel good when you're angry. Others don't feel good when they're angry. And the true strength comes when you're working on being better each time. And I think like kindness to ourselves is always the hardest.
Yeah.
Like cutting us some slack, but practicing that on ourselves. I just want to share something really quick. There was like this Instagram reel where it was like this girl going to the gym, and she was like, this girl came up to me and was like, you look terrible. Why would you wear those shorts? You should put on some pants, or like get clothes that actually fits you. And then I was like watching this and I was like, what? Like, why would someone ever say that to her?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh wait, that was me saying that to myself. And then she's like, how many times do we say negative things about ourselves, right? Because it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm this and I'm that. But it's able to like, that's not kind to ourselves. Like, we have to like give ourselves credit for who we are, our shortcomings, and understand that like we're not always gonna be like, one bad day doesn't make us a terrible person. One bad moment doesn't ruin our day. It's just allowing us to like reshuffle and like, okay, what do I want to do, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, it was like a small example that I liked, where I was like, we need to also be kind to ourselves.
I love that. I loved everything that you shared.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jess.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for being a part of this podcast.
No problem.
And being vulnerable with us. Let's hope we can have you back in the future.
Yeah.
I would like you on another episode for sure. And for all of you at home or wherever you are, make sure to come back here every week where we talk about God and life. Follow us on social media and Spotify. And thanks for tuning in.